Danger abounds. There's no clean way out of this horrifying cocoon, brimming with spikes and spiny protrusions that threaten to excavate all that is within you, both literally the organ meat and also metaphysically. The very spirit which animates your sinew, empowers the bending and the folding and the vibrating of the larynx. Breath is spirit. Spirit is life. Without our souls, we are nothing. Many try to medicate the soul away with 1,000 flaccid facts, but those of us inside the cocoon know the truth. When it's so close to being ripped out of you, the knowledge must permeate every cell of your gray matter, and this is why we dance and why we sing, why we create. Every impulse we have toward the abstract, be it a novel wherein you wrestle with the ghost of loss through comedic reinterpretations of your most private tragedies, or just hypothetically, if you're making videos of yourself in a goat mask, all any of this is an attempt to take that soul, that intangible soul in your real meat hand, and hold it up to the lens of a camera that we hope is there and say, I am here, and I am this. What you behold on a day-to-day basis, it's all facade. We are facade down to our very core. It is only when you pierce your deepest recess that you can twist back out into the unreality of the truth and see the ghosts that we hold within ourselves in those non-physical hands, leaving them unobserved, unannounced, until such time as necessity forces them to become the central facet of even our waking consciousness. The cocoon was expertly crafted down in southern Quebec by a funky spleen scientist named Barry, who had a gun made out of highly solidified ice cube. He found that if you freeze stuff inside a running pressure cooker, the ice gets diamond hard. Yes, the lattice work of the water molecules has certain physical laws which it must obey even under extreme conditions, and yet those conditions can be presented in a fashion in a controlled environment that allows for degrees of malleability. And this is where the first gumbo came from. Quebec, famous for its Cajun cuisine, because ever since the Great Matter redistribution of 1983, the year of the space tornado caused by early attempts at growing a tornado potato on the outside of the International Space Station, or its 1983 predecessor, they yielded a result unpredicted by even the furthest out of Timothy Leary's ilk. The potato was planted in a bunch of dirt glued to the hull. It's tricky gluing dirt. It was more glue than dirt. So this potato, as it's trying to nourish itself in the void of space, it's ingesting a lot of glue. The astronauts put their research bandanas up against the shuttle roof, heard this potato singing the Ramones all day. Soon the roots began to tear the vessel apart. Oh, Houston, we have a problem, and not one we can explain succinctly. Please send help. And Houston goes, you get you're far away, right? Houston addressees respond, you gotta understand, your convenience is not our priority at the moment. Send help now, and we're not saying please this time, to underscore our seriousness. Well, all Houston's astronauts were busy, unfortunately. contacting them from a decaying space station under attack by a tuber, because really, there's not a lot of astronauts. You don't have like a backlog. You just have the log. There's the ones you send into space and literally no other astronauts. You cease to be an astronaut when you return to the surface. Then you're just another nerd with a collection of books handed down generation after generation through your family, consisting principally of mathematically discredited chess strategy that you keep as heirlooms, not for sentimental reasons, but as remembrancers of the inevitability of human folly, and that you inescapably form part of that same cycle. You can remedy the mistakes of the past, don't get me wrong, but there's no way around the mistakes of the present. We can't see them for what they are until we get a good 20 miles on them, take a peek-see in the rear view, and then run the calculations over. You know, computer technology advances a bit. All of a sudden, it's like, you cannot keep opening with your queen's pawn. So Houston hunted around for somebody they could send to help their poor astronauts, and what they found was a lowly chimney sweep. In the 1700s, NASA's had time travel for like a bit now, and honestly, it's just anticlimactic. You go back and you're like, the fashion is strange and everything smells funny, I want to go home. And then it stops because they make it stop. This is a very efficient way of life. This chimney sweep, everyone called him Buster. I'm pretty sure he didn't have an actual name. There's got to be like, how do I even put this? You got to be an orphan among orphans to wind up sweeping the chims. That's what they called them back then, the chims. Chimney sweeps, lacking education as they were, couldn't pronounce the full word. And back then, like peep your Oxford English, back then chimney, it was pronounced kahimni, but the great diphthong divergence resulted in kahimni becoming gradually bastardized by the poor and sooty. So you would have a fancy household calling up the local agency saying, we need somebody to aid in the maintenance of our kahimni. And then this dude would show up and say, where's your chim? And they'd respond with, we don't know what that is. Are you trying to say chimp? And then he would brandish his bristly broom and say, nah, mate, I mean your chim. And they would say, oh, you must be the simpleton we ordered. And he would say, aye, ma'am, that I be. And then he'd go sweep their chim. And it was derision at first. The people started, changing the kh to a ch. They were just mocking the impoverished. It's a bad look, but it's how the word evolved. So then your kahimni sweep is a chimney sweep before too long. And so they send this Buster back to the present of 1983. And he says, all right, where's your chim? And NASA says, it's a few stories up. We don't have stairs or a ladder, though. You're going to have to get inventive. And look, if you're this level of destitute, getting inventive is it's the mechanism through which you survive. You can't live free of innovation and make it under those conditions. So they have him look through the telescope, show him where their kahimni is, and he says, I'll jiffy it out in 2 figures of a whale's uncle, I will. Soon, one way or another, there's a knock on the door of the space station. The panicked astronauts, who have made it through the assaults of this now obviously sentient and clearly displeased potato, like you gotta understand, all the angry music and the neurotoxins and the dirt glue have warped this poor plant to the point that it is functionally a beast. So Buster gets inside and says, show me a swizzle of your chim, fellas, and I'd not turn up me smiggle at a glass of rain. Quite parched, I be. And they're like, NASA asks us to recycle our sweat for water. We do think they have a better way, and they're just sort of hazing us to induct us into space? Would you like to drink our sweat? And Buster goes to say no in a colorful and old-timey fashion, but begins choking. Oh, throat's so dry, and he says, "Oh, saints preserve us. Well, I've already had to swallow all me pride. Beggars can't be choosers and all that." So they take turns sweating in this chimney sweep's mouth, and then he fights a potato. He wins.